whatever you do, be your best. Do the best you can to whatever career, whatever you're going to focus on. Put your best on when you do that.
This podcast is proudly supported by the Ōtara Network Action Committee, ONAC, community-owned, community-driven, and community-led.
Welcome everyone to the Ōtara podcast, sponsored by ONAC. ONAC, community-owned, community-driven, community-led. Now, had an amazing guest by the name of Robert Perelini. I hope you heard about him. He's an awesome fella. He's part of the MYRIVR group, and he's doing amazing things in terms of our community. He's opened an app for us to, if we need help, we'll send out an alert and be able to find the right organization that can be able to deliver that help. We've gone through his past as well as, his thoughts on technology, his thoughts about the community, and plenty more things in his mind and in his life. So if you're watching this, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. So Robert Perelini, myself, we are Ōtara Podcast. Enjoy. How was your morning, Rob?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Yeah. What did you end up doing this morning? I saw you engage with Will and a young gentleman over here. You were discussing about things?
Yeah, no, we were just talking about Deonje, just about his future. He's a young 19-year-old. He's lives and raised in Ōtara, and he's got a real good interest in music, and so I just wanted to sort of encourage him to pursue things that he has passion with,
Yeah.
So, and give him a few ideas on where he can build a career on if music's sort of a real focus for him.
Sweet, man. I mean, I was just thinking about, when I heard the age of 19, I was thinking to myself, damn, wouldn't it be great to go back to that age, the ways to be young.
Can't even remember when I was 19, mate. I do remember my first job at 18, but at 19 it was all a blur.
Fair enough. Yeah. Speaking of being 19, let's go back to young Perelini, Rob. How was your upbringing, and could we go through a amazing introduction from you?
Sure. So my name is Robert Perelini. I grew up in West Auckland. I was in an atypical Samoan family. You have your parents, and then you have your siblings. I have 3 brothers. I had 2 sisters. One passed away when she was young. But we had a typical lots of family. You got your cousins and all that. So my dad was pretty fortunate. My family purchased a house out in New Lynn. In those days, in West Auckland, especially in New Lynn, was farms. There was a lot of farms. So I think Dad, we had like a 1/4 acre, I think, in those days when we bought it. But it was very rare when Pacific Islanders bought houses, and so my dad was one of those rare migrants that managed to buy one for the family. It was good.
But sorry, I'm looking at you like if I've struck gold. I never hear about those type of stories where our Pacific Islanders brothers and sisters have struck gold in land and bought that sort of. I hear stories like my mother and my father who come all the way from the islands, and they like I said the story earlier. My mother and father were brought in by priests that were sponsored. So they were brought in, and then they lived around West Auckland, so Greenland, around that area, until that big revolution of industry that happened here in South Auckland. Decided to move down to around East Tamaki. That's the very first house. And then they started to build their the family from there. So that was the whole plan, was to not only bring family from the islands to New Zealand as like the anchor point, but to also build up things. So for you're just a rare occasion. We haven't heard that sort of story, So it's quite rare for me to hear, as well as all South Aucklanders,
Yeah, my parents were hardworking. My dad worked very, very hard. He worked several jobs. And saved a lot of money, but I think one of my dad's, our parents' focus was bringing family from Samoa to New Zealand. They saw lots of opportunity here, and one of his his advice was to, when you get here, buy a house. So a lot of our families that did come, that a lot of his brothers that he did bring over in his family, they actually did buy houses. They did buy property here, which was really fortunate for us, given the climate. And they worked hard, so we were quite fortunate. Our family was one of the earlier Ifakasa churches. One of our ministers there was my dad's nephew, I believe, that big white church in Grey Lynn. That's where we all branched from. So we were a religious family, quite a religious family, but like most of us guys born in New Zealand, we didn't like going to church. We just found it boring. Learned our Samoan, but didn't follow through with it. So my Samoan is pretty bad, probably just like our brother, the Usos. Anyway, yeah. So we went to. I was raised in West Auckland. Went to school in Kelston, the best school in New Zealand, Kelston boys. And I always had a dream that I didn't want to work in a factory job. That was one of my goals when I was very young. I sort of adopted that quite early in my age. I wanted to run my own business. I felt that was a dream of mine as well. But of course, you still need to go to work and get some skills and stuff like that. So, I went to school really just to eat my lunch, probably like a lot of Samoans. Wasn't very good at education. I was a sort of borderline student at school. Yeah.
C's get degrees, man.
Yeah, C's get degrees. And I played rugby. I did wrestling. Wrestling was my main sport. I represented reps in wrestling for Kelston. I had a strong wrestling team at the time. And I grew up in the age of Inga Tuigamala and the Apollos and the Willie Losses of the world. Which was sad losing Willie.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
But and Inga the same year, so
absolutely.
that's was a big
Two
big
legends
for Kelston.
Yep.
But yeah, I sort of grew from there. Decided to get a job. Left school quite early. Oh, I wouldn't say early. I was a second year, first. I was forced back to play rugby for first 15. But I ended up getting a job as a claims officer for NZI at 18, man. Ooh. Office job. Always wanted an office job. But the problem was? I didn't know how to read or write very well. So typing a letter, claims letter was really, really hard. Had to borrow off colleagues and copy their letters, and it was. I just had to fake it to make it, and then and I actually met my beautiful wife there. So it was an office romance. My wife Melinda.
Oy.
So. And that probably what got me fired. But I did get to a better job when I left that job, the insurance job. I ended up in the shipping industry with the New Zealand Dairy Board. And I was really fortunate because my pay doubled when I went there. It was a government agency at the time. It's Fonterra now.
Yep.
But I worked as a certification officer there. I really enjoyed that job. I spent 4 years, met some very good long-term friends, and I went overseas. I left 4 years later. I went to do my OE. Went to the United States, 92, for about 6 months. My wife and I, at the time, was my girlfriend and my partner. We travelled all around the US, experiencing quite a lot of differences. It was huge over the US. I really wish I could stay there, but we did our time. We came back, and so I was always sort of wanting to get higher education. That was one of the things. I went back into. I did a small stint with the territorials. I was actually tricked into going to the territorials, but that's another story. But I loved it. I loved being in the reserves. That was actually a very good experience, especially at a young age. I encourage our Pacific communities, Pacific young people, 19, if you don't know what you want to do, I think going into the reserves or even in the army, it's a really good option because you do get some real good life skills there. You can actually get your driver's licenses, full-time driver's and truck licenses and stuff. There's a lot of things you can learn there, and you can come out, very well experienced, some good leadership skills in there. So I'd encourage them, if you aren't too sure, do that. Taking a bit back a bit, I really wanted to be a policeman. Actually, that was my goal. Leaving school was to be a policeman. I actually applied for it, and the funny thing was that I passed everything, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do right. That was the first time I was quite fit. I was able to run. Then I realized there was something wrong with my eyes, and so they were going, "Oh, there's something wrong." And then I realized I was short-sighted, long-sighted, one of those. And then I failed because at the time you weren't allowed to wear glasses in the police. So they said, "Sorry, mate, you can't make it." So I said, "Oh, well," and that's why I did go overseas. But yeah, I really wanted to be a policeman.
Just imagine you being a police officer. Currently, just being right now, if you weren't doing the things that you were doing, I reckon you would have upheld the law. I would think that you would have been a stunning police officer, to be honest. You would have been a beacon of hope in terms of our community and whatnot, based off what I've heard so far in your life, Yeah,
I think it takes a unique person to be a policeman. I've worked with policemen with some of the projects we've had. It's a hard life, though. It is pretty tough. But I was always a person that I felt myself that I could talk to people and sort of encourage them to do better, etc. But yeah, no, thanks for that. It was a dream that I wasn't able to fulfill. I think nowadays you can be a policeman with glasses. Well, that time been and gone. I even saw, I think I read something several years back, a 50-year-old woman had become a police officer. So, but I think that's not me anymore. But thanks for that. That would have been an interesting career, but my path took me elsewhere. I ended up I was still doing the reserves, but then I moved into shipping and freight forwarding. I was a freight forwarder. Well, I was specifically focused on personal effects, like Pacific families sending stuff to Samoa. So I was involved with that for about 4 or 5 years. That was really fun, watching people export, furniture, old furniture, clothes, food, all to Samoa. There was this one time, our poor families would build the box, and they'd build it in the house. They'd actually build it and put it in, and you couldn't get out the door, so they had to pack it off, break the box down. It was so funny. Some funny times. Or they would put a whole lot of concrete on these containers that you couldn't actually lift off and wreck the trucks. And so I'd be going, oh man. So that was interesting. But I did get to meet a lot of our community at that time. And the funny thing is that it was a position of a Samoan speaking role. So I had to fake it to make it that role too. I had to actually go back to my dad and say, "Oh, can you read this ad for me, please? Because I can't read it." He said, "What?" So I had to learn my Samoan real fast until they actually later on in the years they hired an actual Samoan speaking operator, and then I just passed the course to her. But it was so funny, man, because she used to listen to me speaking Samoan, and I was just so embarrassed because I start sweating because I can see that she was here listening to me. And I'm like, "Fa mole mole," and she goes, "You'll be going," nodding her head, and I'm going, "I'm just going to pass you over to somebody," and just hand it over to her. So that was interesting. They seem to be doing these funny things.
No. So, I was looking, before we did this interview, I was looking at your LinkedIn page and trying to get as much information in terms of how I can go through with this interview. And I noticed one thing that keeps popping up, which is technology. What piqued your interest in terms of technology? What got you so interested about technology in general, of like computers and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have a knack to see the writing on the wall, what's happening, or the future sort of industries that were coming in. Computer was one of them. I saw Kelston was one of the very early schools that had computers at the days when I was at school, and I found that really interesting at that time, and that was in the 80s. So what really got me into computers was that I'd actually keep changing careers. So I went from shipping, I went from insurance to shipping, and then I went to casino. I spent about 8 years in the casino industry. I loved that industry. That was when Sky City first opened, so I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be a dealer. So I ended up traveling a lot in the casino industry, worked in the Middle East, and it was during that time I was working in Sydney at the time. I thought I better get into the IT space because that seems to be a real big up and coming industry, and that was in 1998. So I decided to go back to school, study. What a big failure that was. I just realized that now I know why I didn't go to school, because I just could not study. I just didn't have the knack of sitting in a class. Plus, it seemed like the industry was quite behind in schools compared to what I was learning through just contacts that I'd made. So in the late 90s, and I heard the old millennium bug was coming and all that stuff. I thought, everyone's going to make $500 an hour. And I thought, I could be doing that. That didn't happen. Ended up going overseas in the Middle East and working there. And that's where I started enhancing my IT skills. I was introduced to a internet cafe guy, and he said, do you want to build computers? I said, yeah, man, that's what I've been looking for. So I did that on the side while I was working in the casinos there. And as I sort of built my IT skills in the early 2000s, I came back to New Zealand, and I thought I had some pretty good IT skills. I thought I was okay, but I couldn't land a job, and I was like really, really tough. So I thought, they just wouldn't hire me. So I decided my wife saw an ad, a franchise ad, PC People. It was called PC People at the time. It's like those computer troubleshooters. Yeah. So I thought, my wife said, you can do this. And I said, yeah, I can do that. So it was a franchise. And I thought, I've got to pay X amount of dollars for this franchise. And it was a computer repair guy. So I thought, okay, sweet, I'll do that. So I applied for this franchise. I got it. And apparently there was only 2 of us. So I thought, okay. But the guy there that was the first franchise, he was a really good IT guy. So I learned a lot from him. And he taught me a lot about networking. He taught me quite a bit about this. And I'd also had a good friend as well when we were overseas. He was a high-end tech guy, and he was trying to teach me a lot as well. And I ended up doing this franchise. I ended up being quite good at it too. I was the actual, almost like the, poster boy for that franchise, because I'd done really well with it over 2 or 3 years. And, we expanded from 2 to about 25 franchises just because of me. So I was encouraging a lot of people to come on board. And that was really cool. And we scored quite a lot of big contracts. So I was learning all my IT from self-taught. One thing I do remember the sad days in those days was that we were still on dial-up. So there was no Google, no YouTube, no Google, no nothing. So you had to learn by doing. And I think that's where it comes from with I found with my skill set is that I learned always from doing. I never learned from books. I tried to learn from books, but I just don't seem to have the mental capacity to be able to sit for long periods of time reading books.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I fit in that box as well. You give me a textbooks, you give me instructions, I'll just look at it and go, this is foreign language to me. I don't understand this. And I think that's a lot of our, I feel with our, just coming through as a student council member, looking into MIT students, a lot of our Pacific Islander, Māori-based students, they struggle with that sort of like PowerPoint presentations and whatnot. But if you give them the opportunity to touch physical things, they can visually and physically learn what to do next with it.
Yeah.
And I honestly think a lot of our tutors need to learn that we're different from the normal mold in terms of learning.
Yeah.
And I hear that, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, that verifies it for me.
And that's absolutely true. I think our ancestors have proven that through that's traveling through the oceans by doing and building in scientific methods that now science looks at as that makes sense with our boats and how we navigated through the stars. So I think we're just natural born scientists and mathematicians just through our own genetics, through our own generation. So I think by doing is where where I think we lack in education here in New Zealand through our community, because there seems to be a set way of learning and there doesn't seem to be much flexibility, and why we have so many of these alternative education offerings out there. So I think with technology as it's grown and it's improving, I mean, I saw another trend. I did from franchise. I moved to cloud-based computing early in the 2003 when Azure and Amazon weren't even existed. So we built we had a very successful business. My business partner and I, and we built a very big company. So from there, over a period of 5-6 years, I could see, or me and him, we could see the writing was on the wall for that stuff as well. We can see Microsoft bringing in all their stuff, and we decided to move along and get out of it and do something else. And that's where it moves to. At the time, I think it was about 2014, we decided we'd sold the company. I was working for the other company that purchased it. I had to transition everybody across, and I ended up deciding what I was going to do next. And I thought, well, apps was coming. I could see that was a big thing. So I waited till an opportunity came, and then our MYRIVR, the app came up through working with the police. They wanted to have an app that allowed them to find social services where they were policing. And South Auckland was the main sort of focus on police activity. When they saw youth on the streets, they were able to use our app, find a provider, contact the provider comes and picks them up, etc. So that's where it birthed that idea of that particular app. And we worked, I think, with the police for about 3 years on that project. It was a really intense project. We had a lot of investors. We had a lot of time we invested in there. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way we'd like had gone, which was a national rollout. There was lots of moving parts, a lot of probably
working gears in the background, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of probably bureaucracy that I would like to say that was, wasn't sort of fit for us. They decided not to move with it, and we were fine. We just ended up having to pivot. We released the community version of that one, which is now in there, which we have about 7,500 users, and we have about 30,000 providers with about 8,000 providers with about 30,000 professionals in there. And it's used by the police still, by some of those people. But that's what we had to do. We had to pivot, and then just work organically. We went from there, and we were working mainly in South Auckland. We were working with lots of other organisations that liked the concept. We finally got a few more breaks with working with the Electoral Commission, building kiosks, working with the Auckland Council, with our app, promoting it with our trust, and with Judith. I've known Judith, who's the CEO of Accelerating Aotearoa. She was, I've known her for about 20 years, me and Judith. She's been involved in community for such a long time. And she's been a real blessing, for our communities, because her and her husband, Tony, has just been put her whole heart and soul into it, sacrificed their careers. And I saw that as a sort of, as something I would want to aspire to, leave the corporate or leave all that opportunity and give something back to communities. So she had been working in Ōtara for a while, so I really wanted to do something, put something into South Auckland, especially Ōtara, because I think that's where the heart of our Pacific community is. And I guess the thing was with our community app, we had started to gather a lot of momentum, and we had Judith as our chair of our Trust MYRIVR chair. And we were getting so much momentum, not only just locally or nationally, but overseas. We even got some huge funding from overseas to bring it to them. But as just about to launch, we did our big kiosk launch. We did all our software launch, March 1920.
Oh my God. Yeah.
March 1920. I remember that day we were at Te Puke. I think they're up there, Te Puke and Ōtara, were about to launch everything, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And it was just like, so what's going to happen now? So our very expensive kiosks that we'd spent quite a lot of investment in got put in, shelved. All our projects got shelved, and we were in a different, I think we were just in a different dimension, I think, in a different multiverse.
Definitely a Twilight Zone moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Twilight Zone, yeah. So, and I think that's been sort of foggy and hazy for the last 2 years since COVID. But what has happened is that now that we're sort of coming out of COVID, it was only probably about March, April, May, June this year, really, that we started to be able to consolidate, come back again, and we started getting more calls to go, can we come back with that project again that we started with the kiosks? I said, yeah, of course, we can do that for the voting and all this stuff. But what had happened was that our suppliers were all gone. They didn't survive that. There was one, our main supplier did, but their suppliers didn't survive. So it was like, we couldn't get their numbers, and we're still working on that, but we can't get the numbers to build that resource because of the manufacturers. A lot of them no longer exist.
Yeah, so they got hit hard, eh?
So that was sort of okay about it. There was other options, but then leads me back to where it came back with ONAC. So I think today is where where ONAC came to us in June, July this year and said, can you modify the current existing one that's in the community to act as an alert app? And when we were approached by ONAC, we said only on the condition. We weren't too sure because we did have quite a lot of them in our books, but we said only on the condition that it's community driven, because we don't want it to be provider or government driven, because we've been there, done that. So ONAC promised us that was the case. So that's where we're here today. Last 3 months, we launched in October. We've been working with about 10 families here with Accelerating Aotearoa, and we've got several other families that are going to be incorporated, working with providers. And that's really, really exciting because it's giving us an opportunity now to put technology in the hands of our communities, especially our vulnerable communities, who need to be able to find the social services without having to navigate so much in the app, but to be able to just call or send a message through our contact center. And the contact center manages it from there for them and enables the providers to service our communities at their request. Yeah, so that's sort of where we are today. It's pretty exciting.
It was huge work, and just hearing the story, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to it. It's like, that's awesome. It's not just only awesome, but it's beautiful, because then you're allowing a community like Ōtara, and I'm thinking about it. And I came to this place about a year and a half now, going into my second year. And I'm just thinking back, I'm like, I remember my goal was to build a beautiful bridge with that technology divide, because I've done 6 years worth of studies, 3 years in networking, 3 years in software. And I think to myself, and I'm looking around, I'm like, yeah, you see the younger generation with like phones and laptops and whatnot, but then you look at the older generation who's still trying to learn that sort of thing, that wants to be involved in, with the young people and trying to learn how to use that. And then it goes back to that word, those two magic words, technology divide. It's such a huge thing, We're underprivileged. We don't have that much in terms of technology, but then you have a beautiful person like yourself who's going, there's a possibility we can be able to show you how to use this technology in a way that not only that you're learning about that technology, but as well as creating a safety environment for our community. So if something does happen, they can send out an alert that they'll be able to go out there and broadcast out and say, we need help. And I think that's key with our communities, is that we need to be able to do that, is to ask for help. We go back to COVID. COVID's one of the big things I'm thinking about, is that it was hard for us to reach out like that, you know? And then, you know, it's hard. It's hard to say help. It's hard to say those words. I need help. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing is that what this technology will do will enable our communities to be able to provide a platform for them to voice their needs, but also provide feedback on those services that are provided to them. So there needs to be accountability, and this is what the ONAC MYRIVR project is about. And having us an app on their phone to be able to access that through just touching a button rather than trying to search for the provider, get in contact to the contact center, but also to be able to see whether the service has been delivered, so they can provide feedback. We will enable them to provide ratings, so we can rate services, and so that way we can tell our partners, who are the providers, that there is some feedback that might not necessarily be positive, that they could look back at their own organisation and fix things so they can better serve our community, because that's what they're there to do. I guess the thing is that, also, we have to, as a Pacific, if we can't get opportunities, we have to make our own opportunities. That's when it comes back to when I came here and I couldn't get a job. I had to become a franchise and be my own boss, because no one else was going to do that for me. And that seems to be a common story for a lot of us, like take yourself, take Will, take even Ray from the Pacific Digital Hub. He's had to invest his own money, and he's in a position to do that. But he's not in a position to better himself. He's in a position he did that for the community, because of course there's opportunities, but he realizes that, like us, you have to invest back into your community if you really want to be successful. You have to put your money where your mouth is, and that's what people like Ray have done, as people like you guys have done, as myself, because that's that way you get to control your own destiny and how you see how you can best serve your community. So, there's a lot of people that do a lot of lip service out there, and, but when you actually ask them also, how much money have you put on the table for the community? And they probably can't tell you, because they probably put none out there. So, we have Pacific leaders out there as well that, we have to, for us, I think, to get their attention, is that we have to stand out. There are a lot of good Pacific leaders out there that can make a big difference. I like to say, thanks to people like Spark Health, William Reddy from Spark Health, the CEO there. Spark Health is just amazing, for them to be able to contribute to this Ōtara MYRIVR project as well. And we want to make them proud to be able to ensure that their investment to this project is worthwhile. So that's why a lot of us are doing a lot of pro bono work. This work costs a lot of money, but we're doing the work to do it. So, there's a lot of good people out there, and there's a lot of good people here. And I'm just glad to be a part of it, especially out here in Ōtara. It's just amazing. It's an amazing, even though I've grown out West Auckland, Ōtara, they've got an amazing collaboration of people here. It's just, there's so much to do. And very little resources, but we make it work. So, technology can be the turnkey for us, where, if I'm to look at another big project we're looking for, as in part of STEM focus, we're doing what we call a rocket space program, working with aerospace education to deliver our hands-on approach for STEM, because I think that is the only way I believe that we can learn like our ancestors, right? We do, and we do it hands on. So we're looking at putting that together in 2 camps, one in Pukekohe with Ray's team and one out here in Accelerating Aotearoa. We were going to build spacefaring rockets. And this group has done that before. It's in the schools and part of the schools, but I wanted to bring it into our Pacific community because I told them this is how we'll learn. This is how we'll learn STEM. We'll learn how to fly a rocket. We'll learn how to build motherboards or circuit boards. We've got tutors to help us do that, and we'll launch a rocket from junior, intermediate, and senior. That's how we're going to learn our STEM, and let space be our goal. Let space be the place we're going to go to next. We've already traveled the seas. Let's travel space, and I think we're the best to do it. Us Pacific, yeah.
You think about greats. You think about the United States. You think of Neil Armstrong. You think about Buzz Aldrin. I would like to see the very first Pacific Islander who sends a rocket out to space, and not only that, our first astronaut that goes to space. And be a part of the amazing team of the International Space. The base up in space, among the other, scientists, and then watch them glow out there and you're like, yeah, I'm from New Zealand. I'm a Pacific Islander. Hell yeah, I can do whatever I need to do.
Yep, we call ourselves polynauts.
Yeah. I love that. Polynauts. That's a cool name. All right.
Okay.
Cool.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to always leave off with our beautiful guests with this question, which is, do you have a perfect quote or something that you like to or a saying that you yourself remembered that inspired you throughout your journey?
I guess the one thing I've heard is that whatever you do, be your best. Do the best you can to whatever career, whatever you're going to focus on. Put your best on when you do that. There's probably so many other quotes I can do, but for me, it's focus is one of them. Family, and just whatever you're going to focus on in your career, whether it be in your life or in your marriage or whatever, do your best. Okay.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, you too, Vinny. Thank you.
And once again, thank you so much for watching. Bronwyn, I hope you're watching this. Thank you for watching our podcast, the We Are Ōtara podcast.